Welcome to Follow the Money, because at the end of the day, we know why they do it. It is to be the richest, biggest beast in the jungle. So, welcome, Olga Lautman, Andrea Chalupa, two sisters, the sisterhood of fighting fascism. I'm Ukrainian American. I was born in California. I studied Soviet history at the University of California at Davis. I studied Ukrainian at the Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute. I lived in Ukraine for around 5.5 months, and I wrote and produced the journalistic thriller Mr. Jones, starring James Norton, Vanessa Kirby, and it's all about Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine, which gives the larger historical context of Putin's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. And I have a podcast, of course, Gaslit Nation, that launched looking at the 2016 election like a crime scene, because it was. It is the coup that keeps on cooing. And in order for us to make sense of this and Trump-proof and Putin-proof our democracy here at home in America and your democracy wherever you're listening, I'm partnering with the great Olga Lautman, world-renowned Russian mafia expert, for a new show called Follow the Money. Olga, tell us why we're doing the show and what you're going to bring to it as the dangerous woman of international intrigue that you are, dangerous for the fascists.
I am so excited to be doing this because, this is really something that is so much needed. And with Trump flooding the zone with so much shit, a lot of the important stuff, like, the police state he's building, the surveillance state he's building, all the corruption is kind of being swept under the rug and it doesn't get enough attention. So I am so happy to partner with you on this. And basically, our show is going to focus on all the corruption behind the scenes, the, deals, the crypto deals, the jets from Qatar.
Don Jr., the president's son, is cashing in, paying, like, people are paying him for
Yes,
access to our taxpayer-funded White House.
yes.
And he's doing this with the tech bros like David Sachs, who are the crypto kings, who are literally attacking our monetary system of regulations and sanctions to usher in Russian, Chinese-driven crypto. I have a friend in London who was a crypto devotee working for a major crypto firm and got completely burned by it legally and financially. And I know there's a lot of hardcore believers out there, but it's still a wild west, and a lot of criminals are taking advantage, including criminals in our White House.
Well, this is the whole point of crypto because the problem is there's no transparency. So while Trump collects billions and billions via crypto, we don't know where this money is coming from. And, as a result, we've already seen some of the reporting, that has showed that the money is coming from UAE. And then we see, Trump suddenly lending our military and signing an executive order that if UAE gets attacked, guess what? U.S. troops are responsible for it, and we're going to have to protect their sovereignty. So anyway, we are launching the show. There is so much corruption happening on a daily basis. The one thing with Trump, unlike other dictators, is that he is really, I call it naked corruption, because he's really flaunting it in our faces. He feels so emboldened that he's not even bothering to hide, the corruption. He's not bothering to hide the weaponization, for instance, of Department of Justice when he went on Truth Social and said, Pam, I want these people prosecuted. And then days later, we had a prosecution with James Comey. So that's it. A little bit about me for those who don't know me. I am Ukrainian and half devil, Russian and American. Was born in Italy on my way here as my parents were leaving the Soviet Union. I've worked on Russian and Ukrainian issues forever. It feels like my main focus is working on Russia's shadow war and information warfare, disinformation, propaganda, psyops, their arson attacks, assassinations, everything we're seeing, election interference, political capture, everything we're seeing here in the US and across Europe is coming out of Russia. And that's what I've been working on, including, with our election, their new election tactics of calling in bomb threats, which happened yesterday. And I actually said, oh, look, bomb threats again at polling stations. Russia's very busy. Sure enough, today a report comes out. Bomb threats came from Russian email addresses. So that's a little bit about me. I do run a Substack, Unmasking Russia, and I run another Substack, Trump Tyranny Tracker. That one I document just all the weaponization of institutions, consolidation of power, corruption, government collapse, because, with corruption, you will see a collapse of services. In our case, it's literally a government shutdown, and the whole government just collapsed, which is, at the end of the day, the whole point with corruption is that this hurts the main people. And as we see right now, Trump and Republicans are weaponizing food and leaving 40 plus million Americans starving. So,
Which is
anyway,
what the Kremlin has a long history of doing in
absolutely.
Ukraine.
Stalin carried out the Holodomor genocide, which you did an amazing job documenting in your film, Mr. Jones. It took, sadly, decades for the world to recognize it as a genocide, even though you had upwards of 7 million Ukrainians who were murdered by Stalin, around the time that Hitler was murdering Jews. So you had the same thing, and it took decades. I mean, I think really like 10 years ago was the first time there was discussion of Holodomor and, by governments, to finally start working on recognizing this as a genocide. And exactly what Russia is doing now. I mean, and they don't hide it, because if you turn on any Russian TV, read any Russian opinion piece, listen to any Russian state senator, listen to Putin himself, they all say the ultimate goal is to erase all biological matter, which this is what they call Ukrainians, biological matter. And, their concern is more of preserving the architecture in Ukraine while they are erasing biological matter. And this is why we see all, Ukrainians as the primary targets of every single strike by Russia. But back to the show, this is what the show will be on, and every
Follow the
Thursday,
money.
follow the
Who's
money.
getting rich off of Putin's genocide? Who's getting rich off of prolonging Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Who's getting rich from Trump's chaos? That's what Follow the Money will unmask.
And we're also going to focus on the ICE detention contracts, the surveillance contracts, everything. So, all the companies involved in helping Trump turn this into an authoritarian state, because he alone would have never been able to do this. You need enablers, just like Putin has plenty of enablers domestically and abroad. So we'll focus on the enablers, because I think the best tactic, that works is to call these people shame and name and shame.
Out from the darkness because they're hiding behind showman Donald Trump. I've long wanted to do a show like this. I've called for it on Gaslit Nation. I've said people wake up. Donald Trump is just a distraction. And I want to just share some insights on this from my own background. I spent about 3.5 months as an intern for Senator Barbara Boxer of California for a summer in college. And walking around Congress, you could always see who the members of Congress were because they all had TV-ready makeup on, and their hair, men and women hair, was perfectly coiffed, hairsprayed. And there was this glow about them, obviously, literally, because they had a lot of tanner on for the TVs.
Oh God.
But there was this, I don't want to say narcissism, but it was very clearly, and this was gosh, when would that have been? That would have been like 2004. They were very ready to be the center of attention. There's a certain ego, personality there, narcissism, I would say. And they are built to be corporate lobbyists, to take all the hits, for us to yell at them on social media. But do you know who is not built for that? All of the elites hiding behind them, getting rich in the shadows. There are people who are so rich that they throw a lot of money to keep their names off the internet. Those are the people that we're going after, that are propping up Trump, who propped up Epstein, who are propping up whoever is coming next after Epstein. And I think it's extremely important because once you start exposing that whole criminal financial network, including of a lot of polite society folks who try to get, mingle as Ghislaine Maxwell did with the socialite set of presidents like Bill Clinton and Trump and so on, and all the celebrities. Like, once you go after those criminal networks among the elite, that's when they start to unravel. And so I am getting really tired of the whole influencer social media landscape, the Substack set, and just repeating the same damn talking points. Like, can you believe what Trump did today? And it just becomes a game of cat laser pointer where we're just a cat chasing Trump's laser pointer of drama, and nothing's really changing, nothing's really getting done, and everybody on Substack and Patreon and Blue Sky, they're all saying the same damn thing, and it feels like, what are we even doing anymore? And I think a show with Olga Lautman, who is a renowned researcher and investigator of the financial crimes of the Russian mafia here at home as well as all over the world. And I think following these money trails, highlighting them and answering show after show of follow the money, who's getting rich off of this chaos and bringing those people out into the light. That's what's missing from this
Yep.
larger conversation of much needed resistance against Russian backed fascism.
And also, it's extremely important to remember that, you know, autocrats use the same playbook. I mean, it literally is the same playbook, enriching their friends, picking who, will have the state contracts, who will have the power, for how long they can keep that power. Elon Musk got a very interesting taste because, at one point he was the most powerful person, then he made a critique of Trump, and then suddenly they were threatening investigations and to take on their contracts and his contracts. And then now he's back in his good graces and he just got more contracts. So, like talking about this network of people and showing the tactics, because the tactics are all the same, whether it's in Russia with the Kremlin, enabling people while keeping everyone else poor and, having everyone else worrying day to day, hour to hour, how they're going to get by, how they're going to pay bills, put food on the table. Same thing is happening here. I mean, while people have probably made, I saw a report recently, like the past week and a half, the hundreds of billions that they have gotten richer since Trump came into office, January 21st. So we're like talking 10 months, how they have gotten richer. And where are we 10 months later? You have literally 42 million people sitting without, food. And this is what happens. You have the handful on top, and then you have the masses who are basically figuring out a way to survive. And then the other very important tactic is them silencing the media. And we see this happening in real time right before our eyes as network after network, media station after media station is going down one by one, whether they're whitewashing Trump's actions, whether they're just ignoring the actions. There was a report that, as Trump, again, as 42 million people are starving, our military families are standing on food lines after serving this country, and some continuing active members. Trump was gutting our East Wing. And then there were reports that the head of the CNN basically went there and then came back and basically told his staff, like, cut it out, don't mention, focus too much on, the demolishing of our East Wing, which is symbolizing what he's doing to our democracy. I mean, literally tearing down, parts of the White House is pretty much tearing down the democracy, the Constitution, and everything else he's doing, to in U.S. So I mean, that's another very key tactic with all autocrats is to silence anyone, whether it's through intimidation, threats, arrest. In Russia's case, murdering journalists, buyouts, having your oligarch friends start buying up the media to change the media from within, which we're
That's how
seeing.
Putin consolidated power.
Yep. And that's what we're seeing happen in with CBS right now, and Paramount and CBS, and how, you see all the veteran journalists leaving one by one, and that's it. And or even in Russia's case, I'll never forget. I mean, there was a funny puppet cartoon mocking Putin and other, elite, and that drove Putin so mad that like he forced the shutdown of this. So you can't have comedy, and we saw the same thing happen here, recently with Trump going after comedians. So this is what we will be focusing on: the tactics, the networks, the cases happening one by one. Each week we'll zoom into one specific case and discuss and, basically unpack it, name and shame the people involved, talk about the money trail, and that's it.
I want to provide some recent historical context. One of my first big jobs in the media, I was working for Condé Nast Portfolio. Condé Nast Portfolio was a fancy, glossy business magazine for the CEOs of the world, for the executive class, and everyone aspiring to be among the 1%. Why was I there? I was there because I desperately needed a job and they desperately needed help because they're launching a magazine, and a family friend brought me in. And it was absolutely fascinating because I got to work with some of the best minds in not just business financial reporting, but also journalism, including Gabe Sherman, who would go on to write the screenplay The Apprentice, all about the rise of Donald Trump and his longtime mentor, Roy Cohn, the scumbag, anti democracy, authoritarian lawyer who worked for Joe McCarthy in the crazy witch trials of Joe McCarthy, which would lay the groundwork of the authoritarian MAGA movement we have today. Anyway, so at Condé Nast Portfolio, stunning writers like Michael Lewis, who did Moneyball, he was writing for them. All these great editors were there. Jesse Eisinger, who is at ProPublica and led the investigations into corruption of the Supreme Court. That's where I cut my teeth as a journalist. And it was absolutely fascinating. They did some really great reporting. But one of the most important things I learned there was how no financial magazine that year won the Pulitzer Prize for reporting in a year when the 2008 economic crash hit, when Bernie Madoff, the most massive Ponzi scheme, hit, taking down fortunes of Holocaust survivors. So it was basically like my film Mr. Jones, where Walter Duranty wins the Pulitzer Prize, writing press releases about Stalin in the New York Times. At the same time, Stalin is laying the groundwork for a man-made famine to deliberately mass murder millions of people, the vast majority in Ukraine, so that the Russians could colonize, take over Ukraine from within, because it's the breadbasket of Europe. And so I was living that story. I mean, that was just eye-opening to me, how history repeats, how media, the power centers of media, are more concerned about protecting access to the powerful and just getting stories that put a sugar high into the day. They call it win the day journalism, where you get all the attention for some dumb, shallow story where you get to put scoop in the headline, all bold letters, but you're not really changing anything. You're not really forcing any meaningful discussions. And that's why it just continues. The crises continue. So what we're looking to do is reform-minded muckraker journalism, where we really get under the surface and we help us stay grounded in who the elite criminals are, who are trying to hide in the shadows of Donald Trump's deliberately engineered reality TV show of terror. As we always say on Gaslit Nation, they cover up their crimes with scandal. So all that chaos that we're ping-ponging around, that's all deliberate to destabilize us. Our show, Follow the Money, is going to be a grounding exercise in how we fight back against the global oligarchy that is driving the fascism crisis, not just here at home, but around the world.
Yeah, and I mean the media, I have so much to say about the media. It has failed, and especially mainstream media and especially cable news. I mean, with 24 hours, you would think they'd have more to fill than with just these, glossy chasing stories. So yes, we actually will focus on this, and I'll tell you, it makes a huge difference because, for instance, in Ukraine, I've worked on a lot of corruption issues there and here, and how it ties to here and how it ties to Europe. And in Ukraine, I mean, shining the spotlight on corruption has made a huge difference. I mean, this is what makes society stronger. When civil society starts, using their skills, when media, despite any threats or intimidation, continues, it makes a huge difference because, then you have people discussing this and you can make changes. I mean, we saw in Ukraine after 14, after Maidan, Yanukovych and his corrupt ilk fled over the border to Russia. And I mean, then when finally civil society, after he left, went into his palace, of course, it was the same thing. I mean, very similar to what Trump is building in the White House, which is very similar to what the Kremlin looks like, very similar to Saddam Hussein's palace. I mean, they all have the same gaudy taste of lots of gold. It was from relentless journalism and activism that these changes were made. This is why it's so important to do it here and to continue pushing forward, because at this moment, we are in a position where Trump is preparing criminal investigations against organizations that investigate corruption or protect democracy or protect immigrants. We need to push back against this. And if more and more people do this and stand together, it's harder. And as I always say, there's more of us than them. So it becomes harder for them to move forward. And luckily with Trump, like I said, he doesn't hide it, because I don't recall Russia anything like this ever happening where you have someone literally flaunting the corruption in your face. I mean, with the Putin regime, you see the corruption, the corruption, but they are not on TV, showing you freaking, marble bathrooms or look at my new gold, everything. Like they don't do it. I mean, at the same time, they do realize that the people are the ones who still, control, have the power. And, in Russia, they're sensitive to pissing off people by flaunting the corruption right in their face. Here, Trump, not so much. I mean, he's more than happy. What's the problem? I took a $100 million bribe from Qatar in the form of a jet. What's the
And
problem?
now Qatar gets their own military base or whatever in partnership with the US military on US soil. So we're going to unpack that story as well, who is getting rich off of that, because it's not just Trump. There's a
No.
reason why Trump is back in power, because there are a lot of people that need to get brought into the light who are riding his coattails and taking advantage of this chaos, and follow the money is going to help make them famous.
And the last thing, we will not only work on, bringing you each story every week, but being that we are Ukrainians, we'll bring in some resistance tactics when we can. Whether it's highlighting the advertisers who, people can make calls to or blast out on social media, or whether it's, highlighting other law firms involved or whatever it is, we'll bring something to you with some of the stories as much as we can where public pressure can make a difference, because it still does make a difference.
Absolutely. As the Ukrainian national anthem says, we are not dead yet.
No.
America still has a massive fighting chance, and we are absolutely going to get through this, not just for our own sakes, but the world.
And we proved, it yesterday because, for everyone who has been dooming and glooming, which, look, there's a difference between pointing out the corruption, the autocracy, the military state, the surveillance state being built right in front of our eyes, the media being hijacked, and everything happening. I mean, literally, it's identical to what happened in Russia, except the difference is it took Putin 19 years to really consolidate fully power. Trump is doing it like, a month. 1 year is equivalent to a Trump month here. But at the same time, there's a difference between selling doom and gloom, and that's it, all is lost. And then if that's the case, what is the point of fighting? In our case, there's a way to point things out and at the same time to say, look, if we work hard and we are all engaged and we get everyone we know engaged to save this democracy, we can. Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. Are we going to see a lot of blood and, horror in front of us? We have a lot coming, but we still have to work together in numbers, coordinated strategically. And yesterday proved it. I mean,
The big
1 year
election of
ago,
2025, D-Day, as I'm calling it.
yeah, well, 1 year ago, Americans, for some wild reason, put Trump back into office. And, yesterday, overwhelming, numbers for an off-season election, governors' races, mayors' races, I mean, literally small positions like in Georgia, and people came out in overwhelming numbers. Even in California, people were standing hours in lines to vote for the redistricting, the Prop 50, hours even after they already knew that it was going to pass. They still wanted to stand there and say, nope, I know it's passing, but I want to leave my mark on this. So this just shows you that, what happens when people come together and when people want, push back. And yesterday was a very good wake up call to Republicans because literally Dems swept from California across the
From
whole
sea to
country.
shining sea and
Yes.
Mississippi in between, and there's going to be more of that.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, if we want to Trump-proof and Putin-proof our democracy, wherever you live, you need to understand who is getting rich off of this chaos, because
Yep.
that is who is going to bring us the next Trump. And that's why we have to make them famous and force through reforms so that their crimes can stop and that we can have a strong, solid social safety net for all and end this elite lawlessness.
Yep, that's it. So we look forward to everyone subscribing and listening and following along our journey as we decide to, uh, you know, point out every single one who is enabling this fall of democracy in the US.
And remember, follow the money. That's the golden rule of fighting oligarchy.
Yep.
Who is getting rich from the world's misery? We're about to find out.
Bye.